The ultimatum. The holographic display flickered to life in the heart of Earth Defense Command, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Marcus Webb leaned back in his chair, coffee mug in hand, as the image resolved into something that should have inspired terror. Ambassador Krell of the Galactic Council stood 12 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian. 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern across his elongated skull, fixed on the camera with what his species considered an expression of absolute authority. Behind him, through the viewport of his flagship, the Council Armada stretched into infinity 17,000 warships, each one capable of glassing a planet. Primitive species of the 3rd planet. Krell's voice resonated through the translation matrix, each word weighted with 50 millennia of unchallenged dominance. You are hereby ordered to surrender all military assets, dismantle your orbital defenses, and prepare for integration into the Galactic Council as a client species. You have 72 of your hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in the complete sterilization of your world and all colonial holdings. The transmission ended with a display of Power 3 Council dreadnoughts firing in unison, reducing an uninhabited moon in the Kuiper Belt to glowing debris. A demonstration. A warning. The same show they'd given to 600 species before humanity. Admiral Webb took a long sip of his coffee. Around him, the officers of Earth Defense Command remained silent, waiting. Webb was 63 years old, with gray hair and the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades preparing for this exact moment. He set down his mug carefully, then did something that would echo across the galaxy for generations. He laughed, not a nervous chuckle, or a bitter bark of defeated humor. A genuine, deep belly laugh that made his shoulders shake. Within seconds, it spread through the command center like wildfire. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, manning the communications station, snorted into her hand. Colonel James Rivera, head of tactical analysis, grinned so wide his face hurt. Even the normally stoic Captain Yuki Tanaka cracked a smile. Did he? Chun gasped between giggles. Did he really just threaten us with 72 hours to comply? After blowing up a moon, Rivera added, wiping tears from his eyes. Like we haven't already mapped every weapon emplacement on every ship in that fleet. Webb composed himself with visible effort, though his eyes still sparkled with mirth. All right, people. Someone want to explain to our distinguished ambassador why threatening humanity is like showing up to a nuclear war with a pointed stick. The laughter subsided into professional focus, but the amusement remained. This was the moment they'd been training for, planning for, across 2 centuries of carefully orchestrated deception. Shall the first send the standard response, sir? Chun asked, her fingers hovering over her console. Webb shook his head. No, send them that response. Protocol 7. A hush fell over the room. Protocol 7 wasn't a military response. It was a cultural one. Chun's grin returned as she pulled up the file that had been prepared decades ago, updated by linguists, anthropologists, and psychological warfare specialists. She queued up the transmission. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of Earth Defense Command, he said into the recorder, his voice now serious, but with an edge that suggested he was sharing an inside joke. We've received your ultimatum, Ambassador Krell. Before we respond formally, we thought you might benefit from a few pieces of information your intelligence network seems to have missed. He paused, picking up a tablet and scrolling through it casually. First, you should know that humanity has a saying, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. You've been making mistakes about us for 70 years, and we've been very careful not to interrupt you. Webb looked directly into the camera. Second, you arrived in our home system with 17,000 warships. Impressive. Intimidating. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, according to our records. There's just one small problem. His smile was predatory now. We know exactly where every single one of those ships is. We know their shield frequencies, their weapon capabilities, their crew complements, and which captains prefer to sleep on the port or starboard side of their quarters. We've known for 3 years that you were coming, and we've been preparing a very specific welcome. Webb set down the tablet. Third, and this is the important one, you seem to think we're a primitive species with minimal colonial presence and outdated technology. Your intelligence says we have 200 ships and a few mining colonies in our own system. That information, Ambassador, is what we call in human terms bait. He leaned forward. You have 72 hours to withdraw from Sol System and request, not demand a diplomatic meeting on neutral ground. Failure to do so will result in a comprehensive demonstration of why humanity doesn't kneel. The transmission ended with Webb taking another sip of his coffee. Aboard the Council flagship Eternal Dominion, Ambassador Krell stood frozen, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Around him, his advisory council representatives from 12 founding species of the Galactic Council stared at the blank screen where the human's face had been. Bravado, hissed Commander Thrace. A reptilian saurian whose species had conquered 40 star systems before joining the Council. Empty threats from a species that achieved faster-than-light travel less than 200 cycles ago. Did you notice he was drinking a stimulant beverage during our ultimatum? Added Counselor Vex, a crystalline entity that communicated through harmonic vibrations. The disrespect is unprecedented, but Krell's tactical mind was working through the human's words. He said they've known for 3 years we were coming. How? Impossible, Thrace snapped. Our fleet movements are classified at the highest levels. No species outside the Council command structure could possibly pull up our intelligence files on humanity. Krell ordered. All of them. And get me the operative who's been monitoring their system. The holographic display shifted, showing Earth from orbit, a blue-green marble orbiting an average yellow star. Population, 11 billion. Colonial presence, 3 stations in the asteroid belt. Mining operations on Mars and Europa, some small outposts in nearby systems. Total military vessels, estimated 200, all using fusion drives and kinetic weapons that were laughably primitive by Council standards. This is what we're facing, Vex harmonized confidently. A young species with delusions of grandeur. Then why are they laughing? Krell muttered, the question hung in the air. Laughter was a stress response in many species. But the Council's xenopsychology database indicated that human laughter served multiple purposes: joy, nervousness, contempt, and most troubling, the laughter of someone who knew something you didn't. Status report from our surveillance drones, an officer called out. Human orbital defenses are... Sir, they're not activating. No increased alert status. No mobilization. The planet below is continuing with normal civilian activities. Thrace's tail lashed with satisfaction. You see? They're helpless. They know it. The laughter was just psychological posturing. But Krell's instincts, honed through centuries of military command, screamed warning. He'd seen 600 species face the Council fleet. Some begged. Some raged. Some attempted hopeless last stands. None had ever laughed. Send forward scouts to map their defensive positions, he ordered. I want to know what they're hiding before we commit to. The alarm klaxons blared across the flagship. Contact. Multiple contacts. The sensor officer shrieked. Sir, defense platforms are appearing throughout the system, hundreds of them. No, thousands. Where did they come from? The holographic display exploded with new data. All around the Council fleet, like stars igniting in accelerated time, weapons platforms materialized from what had appeared to be empty space. Stealth technology that shouldn't exist. Positions that indicated decades of careful placement. Energy signatures that made the sensor officer's scales pale. "Those aren't kinetic weapons," someone whispered. "Fleet-wide alert." Krell roared. "Raise shields. Prepare evasive." The human platforms didn't fire. Instead, they simply sat there, surrounding the Council fleet in a perfect sphere of overlapping fields of fire. 17,000 Council ships suddenly found themselves in a kill box. Webb's voice came over the open channel again. And now Krell heard what he'd missed before, the absolute confidence of someone holding all the cards. "Ambassador Krell, I forgot to mention one more thing. Humanity has another saying you should know. Speak softly and carry a big stick. We've been speaking very softly for 200 years. On the display, new contacts emerge from every corner of the Sol system. Not hundreds of ships, thousands, tens of thousands. Streaming out from asteroid belts that had been hollow fortresses, from moons that had been shipyards, from Lagrange points where entire fleets had waited in perfect stealth." Krell's voice came out as a croak. "How many?" "About 400 billion, give or take. Every single one of them received your ultimatum. Every single one of them is ready to fight. And every single one of them knows that humanity doesn't surrender." The display showed something that made Krell's blood run cold jump signatures appearing throughout Council space. Human fleets emerging in 47 different systems simultaneously. Not attacking, just ... appearing, sitting in orbit around Council worlds, weapons cold. But the message clear: we can reach you anywhere. "So here's the thing about humanity, Ambassador," Webb said. And now his voice carried an edge of steel that transcended species and translation matrices. "We spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we reached the stars. We know every dirty trick, every tactical doctrine, every psychological warfare technique that sentient beings can conceive. We've fought wars in trenches and in orbit, with sticks and with antimatter. We faced extinction a dozen times and survived every single attempt." He paused, letting that sink in. "You thought threatening us would make us kneel. But humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to be so dangerous that no one dares attack you. We call it peace through superior firepower." The sensor displays showed Council ships attempting to maneuver. Only defined human vessels matching every move, maintaining perfect firing solutions without a single shot being fired. It was a demonstration of tactical superiority that couldn't be denied. "So I'm going to make you a counteroffer," Webb continued. "You have 72 hours to withdraw from Sol System. We'll escort you to the heliopause, where we can discuss terms for a mutual non-aggression treaty. One between equals. Or you can try your luck against a species that's been waiting 2 centuries for someone to give us an excuse to show what we've really been building out here in the dark." The transmission ended with Webb raising his coffee, mugged in a mock salute in the silence that followed. Ambassador Krell stared at the tactical display showing his fleet, the largest armada in galactic history, completely outmaneuvered, surrounded and outgunned by a species that was supposed to be primitive. "Sir?" his executive officer whispered. "Orders?" Krell's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed the impossible. 50,000 years of Council dominance ended not by a desperate last stand, but by a species that had been playing a completely different game. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Begin withdrawal to the heliopause. And get me a diplomatic channel to Admiral Webb." "What should we tell the Council, sir?" Krell watched another wave of human ships appear on sensors, these ones emerging from Jupiter's atmosphere itself, where an entire shipyard had apparently been hidden in the crushing depths. "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them we found something worse than a warrior race. We found a species of strategic thinkers who've spent their entire existence preparing for the day someone tried to conquer them." He turned away from the display, his exoskeleton suddenly feeling very heavy. And tell them that when we ordered Earth's surrender, the humans just laughed. We should have paid more attention to why. Asterisk the less than 6 hours after the Council fleet began its withdrawal from Sol System. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck of Defense Command, watching the stars. Behind him, the command center hummed with controlled activity, hundreds of officers coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Admiral, Lieutenant Chung approached, tablet in hand. Ambassador Krell has agreed to meet at the designated coordinates. Neutral space as requested. He's also asking for... Well, sir, he's asking for an explanation. Webb smiled. An explanation of how we did it, or an explanation of why we didn't destroy his fleet when we had the chance. Both, I think. Good. That means he's starting to understand. Webb turned from the window. Assemble the diplomatic team? And Chun? Make sure we bring the full presentation. If we're going to rewrite the galactic order, we might as well do it properly. 3 days later, in a conference facility hastily constructed on a barren moon in neutral territory, Ambassador Krell sat across from Admiral Webb. The Galactic Council had sent a full delegation, 12 species, each one representing thousands of years of civilization. They looked at Webb with a mixture of fear, confusion, and something that might have been respect. Before we begin formal negotiations, Krell said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into perfect English, I must know, how long have you been planning this? Webb leaned back in his chair, the same casual posture he'd maintained during the ultimatum. Which part? The stealth technology? The hidden colonies? The infiltration of your communication networks? Or the overall strategy of appearing weaker than we actually are? All of it? The strategy began 217 years ago, Webb said. The day we achieved faster-than-light travel and discovered we weren't alone in the universe. We sent out our first exploration ships, excited to meet our galactic neighbors. Do you know what we found, Ambassador? Krell's mandibles clicked nervously. I can guess. We found the wreckage of the Corian civilization, a species that had refused Council membership. Their home world was a lifeless cinder. We found the Teller Collective, once 60 billion strong, reduced to 3 billion servants and laborers on Council mining worlds. We found 600 species, and every single one had the same story: submit or be destroyed. Webb pulled up a holographic display showing a timeline. So humanity did what humanity does best: we adapted. We looked at how the Council operated and realized something crucial. Your intelligence gathering relies on what species tell you. You expect conquered species to report their full military capacity, their colonies, their technology, because for 50,000 years, no one dared lie to the Council. But you did, Counselor Vex harmonized. Its crystalline structure, pulsing with amber light. We did better than lie, Webb corrected. We created two humanities. The public one, the one your spies could see, stayed close to Earth, developed slowly, acted like every other young species stumbling into galactic civilization. We gave you exactly what you expected to see: a primitive species with a few hundred ships and delusions of grandeur. He advanced the timeline. Meanwhile, the real humanity scattered. Generation ships launched in secret, heading for unclaimed systems far from Council space. We built colonies in nebulae where sensors couldn't penetrate. We hollowed out asteroids and created shipyards in the dark between stars. We developed stealth technology specifically designed to fool Council sensors, and we tested it for decades before your fleet arrived. The colonies we discovered were decoys, Commander Thrace realized, his reptilian eyes widening. Most of them, yes. Oh, there were real people living there, doing real mining operations. But they were the bait, the visible presence that made your intelligence officers think they'd found everything. Webb smiled. Humans invented the concept of the shell game thousands of years ago, Ambassador. You were so busy watching the visible colonies that you never thought to look in the dark spaces between them. Shun stepped forward, activating a new display. For the past 70 years, since we detected your long-range reconnaissance drones entering our sector, we've been feeding you carefully calibrated intelligence. Ship counts that were accurate, but only for our decoy fleet. Technology assessments that were correct, but 30 years out of date. Population estimates that accounted for Earth and Mars, but not the 400 billion humans living in deep space stations you didn't know existed. You've been inside our networks, Krell said flatly. The Admiral said you knew our fleet positions for 3 years. That's impossible without compromising your communication systems. Webb finished. Ambassador, humanity spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of espionage before we left Earth. Did you really think we wouldn't apply those skills to galactic civilization? We've had access to Council tactical networks for 42 years. Not to steal technology, though thank you for the baseline sensor data. That was helpful, but to understand how you think, how you plan, how you conquer. He stood, walking to the holographic display that now showed the Council Armada's approach to Sol System. We knew you were coming. We knew the date, the fleet composition, and the fact that you'd blow up something in the Kuiper Belt as a demonstration. That moon you destroyed? It was already evacuated. We moved everyone out 6 months ago and filled it with sensor drones to record your weapons signatures. This is why you left, Krell said quietly. You weren't panicking. You were, what's the human term? Springing the trap, Webb confirmed. Every move you made, we anticipated, because we'd been studying you while you ignored us. That's the thing about being underestimated. Ambassador people stop paying attention. They assume you're not a threat. And that's when you're most dangerous. Counselor Vex's structure pulsed rapidly, indicating agitation. But why reveal yourselves at all? You could have remained hidden. Let us believe you are primitives. And then what? Webb interrupted. Live in fear forever? Build weapons in secret while pretending to be harmless? That's not sustainable, Counselor. Eventually, you would have noticed. Eventually, some Council patrol would have stumbled across one of our hidden shipyards. And if that happened before we were ready, before we could demonstrate overwhelming superiority, you might have actually tried to conquer us. He returned to his seat, his expression serious now. This wasn't just about defending Earth. It was about changing the fundamental power dynamic of galactic civilization. We needed to prove that humanity couldn't be conquered. Not now, not ever. We needed to make it clear that any attempt to subjugate us would be so costly, so catastrophic, that it was unthinkable. By surrounding our fleet without firing a shot, Threes said, understanding dawning. By appearing in 47 Council systems simultaneously, demonstrating you could strike anywhere. By making us realize that trying to conquer humanity would mean galactic war on a scale never seen. Exactly. Webb activated another display, this one showing communication intercepts from across Council space. And we made sure every client species in the galaxy saw what happened. Every conquered world, every subjugated civilization, every species that knelt to the Council received the same message we sent you. Resistance is possible. The display showed riots on 3 Council worlds, protests on a dozen more. The Quarian remnants, those few survivors of the destroyed civilization, declaring independence. The Teller Collective demanding the return of their sovereign systems. You're starting a revolution, Krell said, his voice carrying a note of horror. We're offering a choice, Webb corrected. For 50,000 years, the Council has maintained order through fear and superior firepower. You crushed every uprising, destroyed every species that resisted. But you never faced a species that was genuinely prepared for you. A species that studied your tactics, matched your technology, and refused to accept predetermined defeat. He leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Ambassador. The Council is going to restructure. Not because we're forcing you to, though we could, but because the alternative is watching your empire fragment as every client species realizes they don't have to kneel anymore. We're offering you a chance to evolve from conquerors to actual diplomats. And if we refuse? Vex asked. Webb's smile was cold. Then humanity doesn't fire a single shot. We simply broadcast our technology specifications to every oppressed species in Council space. Stealth drives, weapons systems, tactical doctrines. Everything we used to outmaneuver you. We turn the entire galaxy into a guerrilla war that will make your last 50,000 years look like a peaceful afternoon. The silence in the room was absolute. You wouldn't, Thrace whispered. The chaos alone would be preferable to living under Council domination, Webb finished. Ambassador, humanity has a long history of choosing freedom over safety. We've fought civil wars that killed millions to establish that principle. We've overthrown empires, toppled dictatorships, and burned our own cities rather than submit to tyrants. Do not mistake our preference for peace as an inability to embrace chaos. Krell's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed the implicit threat. What are your terms? First, the Council will transition from a dominance hierarchy to a coalition of equals. Every species gets a vote. Real votes, not the puppet representation you currently offer client species. Impossible, Vex chimed. The logistics alone are your problem, Webb interrupted. You had 50,000 years to develop fair governance models. You chose conquest instead. Not our concern. Second, all species currently held as client states will be offered independence or full Council membership with equal representation. Their choice. That would fragment the Council entirely. Krell protested. Maybe, or maybe you'll discover that species are more loyal when they choose to join rather than being forced. Webb pulled up another display. Third, humanity demands full Council membership with veto power on military actions. We will not allow the Council to continue its policy of preemptive conquest. You expect us to give a species we just met veto authority over our military? Thrace's tail lashed in agitation. You're right. That was poorly phrased. Webb's smile returned. We're not asking. Humanity already has veto authority. We just demonstrated it by surrounding your fleet. This term is about making it official within your governance structure. He stood, walking to the window overlooking the barren moon's surface. Fourth, and this is non-negotiable, the Council will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address the atrocities committed against conquered species. Reparations will be made. War criminals will be tried. The 600 species you've subjugated deserve justice. You're demanding we prosecute ourselves? Krell's voice rose in pitch. I'm demanding you acknowledge what you've done. Humanity studied your history, Ambassador. We know about the Corian genocide. We know about the biological weapons used on the Talar homeworld. We know about the systematic cultural erasure of dozens of civilizations. If the Council wants to continue existing, it needs to confront its past. Webb turned back to face them. And finally, humanity will establish a mutual defense network with any species that requests our protection. Not as conquerors or overlords, as allies. We'll share our technology, our tactical knowledge, and our commitment to never kneeling to anyone. The Council delegation sat in stunned silence. Everything Webb proposed would fundamentally reshape galactic civilization. This is extortion, Vex finally harmonized. No, Webb corrected gently. Extortion implies we're threatening violence to get what we want. We're not threatening anything. We're simply explaining the new reality. Humanity exists, we're not going away, and we will not allow the Council to continue operating as it has. You can work with us to build something better, or you can watch your empire crumble as every conquered species follows our example. He returned to his seat. The choice is yours, Ambassador. But I should mention humanity didn't just infiltrate your communication networks. We've also been in contact with several client species for the past decade. They're waiting to see what you decide here today. Choose wisely. 6 months later, Admiral Webb stood in the same observation deck at Earth Defense Command, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. The Council restructuring accords had been signed 4 weeks ago. 12 species had already declared independence and applied for membership in the new coalition of free worlds. 17 more were in the process of referendums. The Galactic Council still existed, but it looked nothing like the empire that had threatened Earth. Species that had been conquered were now represented. Council military doctrine had been completely rewritten to prohibit preemptive attacks. And sitting on the newly formed Security Council, with full veto power, was Earth's ambassador. Admiral, Chun said, approaching with a smile. Final casualty report from the Sol incident. How many did we lose? Webb asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it said. 0 combat deaths, sir. 3 injuries during platform deployment, all minor. Property damage. 1 uninhabited moon, already scheduled for demolition. Total rounds fired, 0. Webb nodded slowly. The best victory is one where nobody dies. Sun Tzu wrote that 3,000 years ago. Took us a while, but we finally learned the lesson. Do you think it'll last? The peace? Honestly? No idea. Webb sipped his coffee, his ever-present companion. But we changed the equation. For 50,000 years, species had 2 choices, submit or be destroyed. We introduced a third option, resist successfully. Even if the coalition eventually fragments, even if conflicts arise again, the galaxy will never return to the way it was. Because now everyone knows that empires built on fear can fall. Chun gestured to a particular news feed showing celebrations on a former client world. The Teller Collective is asking if you'll attend their independence ceremony. They're calling you the liberator of species. Webb laughed, the same genuine laugh he'd given when Krell delivered his ultimatum. Tell them I'm honored, but the real liberators are the people willing to stand up for themselves. We just showed them it was possible. He turned from the window, heading back to the command center. Besides, we have work to do. 47 species have requested technical assistance with their defense networks. Another 30 want diplomatic exchanges. And someone needs to teach the council delegates that negotiation doesn't mean threatening to blow things up. Sir? Chun followed him. Can I ask you something? Always. When you laughed at Krell's ultimatum, was that calculated? Part of the psychological warfare? Webb paused, considering the question. You know what, Lieutenant? At first, yes. We planned that response down to the second. But when I actually heard him threaten us with 3 days to surrender after everything we prepared, everything we'd built, all the sacrifices humans made to secure our freedom, he shook his head, grinning. In that moment, the laugh was real. Because the absurdity of it, this ancient empire, thinking we'd just roll over after 2 centuries of preparation, it was genuinely funny. He continued walking. That's the thing about humanity, Chun. Even when we're executing carefully planned military operations, even when we're reshaping galactic civilization, we never lose our sense of humor. Because if you can laugh at the face of destruction, it means you're not afraid. And fear is the only weapon tyrants have. In his office, Webb pulled up his personal logs and began recording the final entry on the Sol incident. Admiral's log, final supplemental. The crisis has concluded without loss of life. The Galactic Council has agreed to all terms. Humanity's position as a free and equal species has been secured. Future historians will analyze our tactics, our strategy, our technological achievements. They'll debate whether we were too aggressive or too lenient in our negotiations. They'll argue about the ethics of deception and whether the ends justified the means. But I want to be clear about something for the record. Humanity's greatest weapon was never our ships, our stealth technology, or our hidden colonies. It was our absolute refusal to accept predetermined defeat. It was our willingness to prepare for centuries to ensure our freedom. It was our understanding that sometimes the best way to avoid war is to be so prepared for it that your enemies choose peace instead. The Council declared us defeated before the first shot was fired. They were wrong, not because we had better weapons or more ships, but because we had something they'd forgotten. In 50,000 years of dominance, we had something worth fighting for. When they ordered our surrender, we laughed, not from fear or desperation, but because we knew something they didn't. Humanity kneels to no one. Not today. Not ever. The galaxy is changing. Let's hope we can guide it towards something better than what came before. Webb ended the recording and looked out at the stars. The same stars that had seemed full of threats just days ago, now full of possibilities. On his desk, his communicator chimed. A message from Ambassador Krell. Admiral Webb, the Council would like to discuss a joint scientific initiative. We believe humanity's problem-solving approach could benefit several ongoing projects. Would you be willing to meet? Webb smiled and began typing his response. The galaxy was learning what every human child knew instinctively. The best way to make friends was to prove you couldn't be bullied. Somewhere in the dark between stars, a new human colony was being established. Children looked up at alien suns and dreamed of exploration, not conquest. Scientists worked alongside former council species, sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. And soldiers stood down from battle stations, transitioning to the more difficult work of building peace. The Council had ordered humanity's surrender. Humanity had laughed and offered partnership instead. And in that laughter, in that refusal to accept the old rules, a new galaxy was born. Not perfect, not without challenges, but free. And for humanity, that had always been the only victory worth fighting for. Asterisk.